I was a latecomer to the Uncharted series. In fact, I didn't get my first taste of an Uncharted game until the PS4 era when I smashed through the Nathan Drake collection, and while I enjoyed them, I definitely wasn't blown away by any of them. The Uncharted series is slightly overrated. You know that one game, movie or TV show that all your mates and all the critics rave on about, and then when you finally get around to sampling it for yourself, all the hype that everyone else has generated takes the edge off your first experience and it's removed any potential element of surprise. I feel like I have to stress how much I did enjoy all of the Uncharted games because we sadly live in a world where rational discussions and having mixed opinions is becoming too complex for some simple minds out there. My favourite Uncharted game is undoubtedly Uncharted 4, so that's what I'm primarily going to be focusing on, playing on the PC version of the game, and while the substantially improved visuals and 60 FPS improved the experience tenfold compared to my time playing on PS4, I was still left thinking, it was pretty good. Personal taste is an obvious factor, and I'm definitely more of a gameplay orientated gamer, whereas Uncharted focuses heavily on the narrative, which I also felt has its ups and downs, and I'll get onto that shortly. The real hero of this story though is without doubt the crates. I'm not sure what Nathan Drake is doing pissing about looking for treasure instead of buying shares in the crate enterprise. There would be no Uncharted games without these crates. Henry Avery, the pirate whose treasure Nathan is trying to find, he knew the score, and clearly that's where he amassed his immense fortune, from buying and investing in 17th century crates on wheels and leaving a trail of them all over the world in incredibly convenient places to be used as the only means of progression. Any pirate skeleton that you find on your venture was clearly a stupid dum-dum who didn't actually find the crate and, as punishment, must now spend the rest of eternity rotting in a boxed-off environment puzzle section. I mean, couldn't have Naughty Dog gotten a little more creative with the environmental puzzles? At least in The Last of Us, Joel and Ellie would be pushing different items, maybe a wheelie bin, lifting up a ladder, or placing a plank of wood across a gap. Tomb Raider is the same. Lara will find different items and even use her weapons to expose new ways to progress. Breath of the Wild is another overrated game, and you can check out my review on that if you're interested, but again, there's plenty of variety within the environmental puzzles there too, instead of Uncharted's typical, oh, I can't reach up there and it's too high for a boost. Go and find something to help us get up there, and before you've even looked, your partner gives the crate's location away anyway, like, hey, what's that suspiciously familiar crate over there? And just like that, wham bam, thank you man, puzzle's over. It's incredibly simplistic. Now, an area of the narrative I adored about Uncharted 4 is the character dynamics and their relationships. You can count the number of main characters in the story on your hands, and rather than diluting the character's development over 30 to 40 characters like a lot of games do, we're afforded so much screen time and dialogue with this much smaller group of characters, and as a result, their personalities and relationships evolve over time, and the player can grow attached to each of them in varying ways. I love this. One aspect this action and treasure hunting Indiana Jones style genre always struggles with is getting the villain right. It's the same with the action movies like James Bond. The good guys are allowed that witty repartee and positively reinforced relationships with friends and girlfriends, whereas the bad guys aren't interested in that stuff at all. They're only interested in the grand prize, and with me being desensitized to the impact that bad guys or anti-heroes can have, such as Walter White, Gus Fring, Dexter Morgan or Arthur Morgan, just to name a few of my favourites, I find the types of light-hearted villains like Wraith to be an underwhelming wet blanket in comparison. I'm not suggesting they should be blowing up old people's homes to grab my attention, but having a tantrum and throwing a few pieces of paper across the room hardly gets the blood pumping.
Ooh. You're hard.
I really enjoy the family dynamic though, which I always find relatable regardless of each member's predicament. A long-lost brother who found himself in prison, a supportive wife, and a caring father figure that has your best interests at heart. Naughty Dog really dives deep into these relationships, in particular adding a backstory to the brotherly love between Nathan and Sam, escaping a foster home and exploring and illegally breaking and entering into a house together for reasons that I don't want to spoil. Nathan himself is such a playful guy, and that's one of the many reasons he's adored by the masses. I do think the narrative in any such adventure story like this always has an element of predictability to it, in particular a treasure hunt story with the good guys heading to the same place as the bad guys on a wild goose chase. They inevitably clash and one way or another discover the treasure isn't in the most recently searched place, but what do you know, there's another clue that says we should all charge to a new location and have another gunfight there, until we eventually find the actual location of this treasure. It's a structure that's been tried and tested over the years, and it certainly works for this genre. Couple that with the bombastic action for the player to just switch off and watching the mindless explosions, outrageously choreographed chase scenes and fight scenes, and it delivers everything you'd expect from this categorization of games. For me, what stands it apart from others in the same category is the charm between the relationships, like I mentioned, and it only really hits these heights due to these character relationships hitting their pinnacle and long-term defining moments beyond the credits rolling, and this could only really be achieved in Uncharted 4 as it's the final game in the series. Mechanically, there's not that much to talk about in Uncharted games due to the heavy focus on the narrative, and I've never been a huge fan of third-person cover shooters either, but Uncharted is up there as one of the best. The weapons feel really good to fire, even more so when making use of the DualSense haptic feedback. Turning off the aim assist gives a nice weapon sway without being too punishing, and that's complemented by the variety in how each weapon feels to fire. I love the smaller details in the gunfights, the little flinches when Nathan's hit, the different materials to cover behind being destroyed at different rates, and the biggest compliment I can pay to the combat is the enemy AI. They're pretty lethal, homing in on your position, forcing you out of cover with grenades, trying to flank you, and the big dudes in armor just intimidatingly waltzing over to your position like a tank. There's virtually no stealth mechanics to speak of, like distracting enemies, hiding dead bodies, that sort of stuff. The only stealth mechanic is taking an enemy out from behind, hiding in long grass or in cover, and getting out of sight before the enemy's detection meter fills up. It's as basic as stealth can get, but it's surprisingly good regardless of its simplicity, and a lot of that is down to the enemy's AI, with their varying patrol paths, their thoroughness when searching for Nathan after they lose sight of you, and it goes up tenfold with it almost becoming mandatory to play stealthily when playing on the harder difficulties. Climbing and traversing hasn't evolved too much over the course of the Uncharted series, but it's always felt as one of the smoothest compared to similar games with these sort of mechanics like Tomb Raider or Horizon, albeit Nathan looks totally unrealistic, bouncing from ledge to ledge like a monkey. The emphasis on your joystick directional input feels precise when climbing, and there's no shortage of ropes to swing from and steep surfaces to slide down, which is as satisfying as ever, guiding Nathan to avoid the obstacles, watching the terrain give way beneath him before some dramatic leap at the end. The introduction of vehicles was a very welcome addition to the series, in particular what is probably considered the greatest and most visually awe-inspiring mission in gaming history, being chased by an armoured car down the steep back streets of Madagascar. What a mission that is! With other areas opening up, the actual feel of controlling the jeeps isn't the greatest. They're a little bit too forgiving, feeling like I'm driving on Scalextrics and purposefully slowing the car down in certain sections, which should be the player's decision to slow down or not the game's. I love the moments where Nathan makes use of the jeep's winch though, such a small thing, but I loved getting out, grabbing the hook end of the winch and having to walk around what pillar-shaped object I could find and lock that winch in place. Such a tiny but highly immersive detail. Again, another reason why I think Uncharted 4 was the best in the series was because of these more open sections where exploration was a little bit more rewarding than previous Uncharted games. I have to stress only a little though, because all you're going to find are either notes and letters providing a little backstory to the area that you're exploring, or these little trinkets and random historical items of value, but the search for these was so much better compared to the previous Uncharted games. Instead of just plonking a shining item right in the corner of a room or at the side of a linear path, the environment is much more suggestive, hiding these notes and treasures behind waterfalls or secret caves to name a few places. It just makes the search for these things that much more enjoyable, but in all honesty, should we really be celebrating that? Because that should just be standard, and thankfully it is in Uncharted 4. There is a purpose to these treasures though, each unlocking a certain bonus to make use into your next playthrough, adding some decent replayability as well. Adding these bonuses like unlimited ammo, no gravity, different colour schemes, and early game access to certain weapons is a welcome reminder that I'm playing a game and not just witnessing a spectacle I'm somewhat in control of. Similar to the Resident Resident Evil franchise, which offers similar overpowering features for a second playthrough. It's just a fun way to play the game differently the second time round. If you're planning to buy on PC, then you'll be buying the Legacy of Thieves collection, which includes the Lost Legacy DLC, a very worthwhile DLC, which is another healthy helping of what Uncharted 4 A Thieves End brings to the table, with a few subtle differences and a few not so subtle. For starters, there's no Nathan Drake starring Chloe Frazer and Nadine Ross instead, but also introducing others like the inclusion of a very basic lockpicking mechanic, the use of a phone instead of a journal, and even throwing in silenced pistols, taking the stealth gameplay up a notch. Some argue the Lost Legacy is actually better than A Thieves End, which I don't personally think it is, but you'll undoubtedly enjoy one if you enjoyed the other. I'd really like to hear your thoughts on Uncharted 4 The Legacy of Thieves collection, and your thoughts on the series on the whole. If you can support the channel, I've dropped my Patreon in the description for anyone interested, and for anyone who can support the channel, it would be hugely appreciated. I'll see you in the next one.